were there any riots in jail when you were there? Like, could you walk us
Yeah,
through what a riot's like?
most definitely. I mean, there was like baby riots in the county jail. They were trying to like take away when I was in the county jail. They were trying to take away a meal. Actually, they were trying to reduce us to 2 meals a day. So the inmates like tried to go on like a hunger strike, and that lasted about 4 hours. Like and everybody would toss their mattresses over, started burning stuff. So there was that kind of like protest that happened one time, which was crazy. And then just big brawls. That was the county jail. But in prison, yeah, a big riot happened towards the end of my stretch. I was in solitary already. I'd been in there for fighting, and I was in solitary confinement. But yeah, this I think it was May 2011. This riot kicked off where in the day room, and it spilled out into the prison yard. And basically it was, what it is. It was shanks and fists and locks from the lockers. And I think 10 people ended up getting stuck. My cellmate Jimmy, who was the shot caller, ended up killing a guy on that riot. So by the time I got back from the hole back to the cell block, I mean, half the place was gone.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah,
So I know we kind of
yeah.
bounce around. I'm sorry for this. Two things. Difference between jail and prison. You're fighting the case. You end up taking the plea. How much time do you take? And walk us through that day that your sentence. You know you're not fighting the case. You're going to serve X amount of time. What's that like?
Well, I was fighting my case. First of all, I didn't get any bail because they caught me with so much cash, and they were trying to make these cartel connections. They were trying to like basically prove that I was a member of the Sinaloa cartel, which is crazy. You can't be a non-Mexican. You can work with the cartel, but you can't work for the cartel. I was denied bail. I had bail money. I had $250,000 set. No. It was my bail was $500,000, and the day that I went down to set it, right, you got to come up with 10% of that. So 50 grand. That's nothing. I got that. The day that I was scheduled to go bond out, this was an exceptional thing that was happening to me, right? So what they were trying to do is they were just trying to, because county's so brutal, they were trying to get me to give up my connections, my Sinaloa and drug trafficking sources, right? So they were like, we're just going to leave this guy in here. And every week that they left me in the county, right, I'm suffering, I'm starving, I'm fighting. The conditions are brutal. So
What
every
kind of
week they would
conditions? Like what? Like what's brutal about it? Break it down for us.
I mean, I just told you I was starving, you
Yeah.
know? So it's you're celled up in bunks with junkies that are fresh off the street. People are overdosing. They're withdrawing from heroin. That was huge at the time. There was this before fentanyl. So people would just be screaming in the middle of the night, like bloody murder, because they were coming down off smack. Uh, I would watch people like get beat down, like uh, uh, tied down to their bunks and just like beat down by members of their own gang, stuff like that. So you're never let out. There's no daylight. You're in these pods, and you never see any natural sunlight. So it's kind of stuff like that where it's every day in the county feels like a week, a month feels like a year. It's the hardest, longest time you can do. So they were holding me in there, and my lawyer was like, "Look, the longer you can stay in here, the more apt the state is going to be willing to make a deal with you." Because I knew they didn't have anything. They didn't have any wiretaps. They didn't have any real evidence connecting me to any cartel members or any drug cartels. Right? All they had was a bunch of money. So, and sure enough, the longer I held out, the more the feds dropped the case, the state picked it up, and the DA would come to my lawyer and say, okay, we'll give him 5 years with good time. And we'd say, that. So I'd stay in there a few more months. And then he came back and he would say, 42 months. And finally, we agreed on 36 months with time served and the ability to be part of like a drug program to get a time cut if I was well behaved in there, right? But it wasn't looking good because I was already getting in fights and going to the hole, and I was not. I was giving up on any hope of getting released early, right? So we finally come to an agreement, and I say, let's. My lawyer was like 30. This is a good deal. 36 months. Let's take it. So I said, bet. And and it was anticlimactic because by the end of my county stretch, I was begging to go to prison. I was like, this is so bad. Send me to my home. Like let's get this party going. And yeah, and I just remember going before the judge, and there was nobody in the courtroom, just my parents. There's no glamour to it, right? There's no cameras. There's no nothing. It was just me signing the paperwork, and then you get back to your. They send you back to county. You have your final meal, and then in the middle of the night they say roll up, and you roll all your stuff up, and then they chain you up and they put you on the Gray Goose, and then you begin your journey.
All right. So what's the bus called? Is it Gray Goose, or am I just thinking about trying to get a drink tonight? Gray Goose, Gray
That's
Bus.
the Gray Goose is
It's a Gray
the
Goose.
the
Yeah.
transport vehicle that they take you on. That's just the name that we have for it on
Yeah.
the West Coast. I don't know if they call it that on the East Coast or anywhere else. They call the plane and the feds, they call it Con Air when they put you on the plane and fly you around. But on the West Coast in the prison system, we call it the Gray Goose, and it's basically just a Brinks truck that's been outfitted as like a prison transport van.
Yeah.
And that's a brutal ride, let me tell
I
you.
mean, it was your ride specifically was brutal. Like you saw an actual murder, right? Like what was it?
Yeah,
A lifer killed a
yeah,
rapist. Talk to us
yeah.
about what you saw.
I don't know what his actual paperwork was. He obviously had a jacket. A jacket is a skin beef or a sex crime. And I didn't realize he was got killed till a couple weeks later. But we were getting off the chain, going to Two Rivers. I'd been at Coffee Creek, which is it's a holding facility. It's where all the inmates from different parts of Oregon get sent to after they're sentenced, and they wait in this holding facility. And it's basically like it's a hub, and they decide what prison they're going to send you to. You might have to wait for bed space to open up, depending on what your security level is. I had maxed out my security level at this point because I'd been fighting and carrying on in the county jail, which wasn't really my fault. But I was just playing defense, right? But they, as soon as you go into the system, all of your paperwork, you just get a file immediately. As soon as you walk into the system, the belly of the beast, everything follows you. So I had 4 or 5 fights. I'd been caught with contraband, so they were like, "We're sending you to Two Rivers." Plus, I was young, so they assume that if you're young, you're going to be a troublemaker. So here I am with a pot charge on the Gray Goose, getting shipped out to a maximum security prison. I'm chained up next to dudes getting ready to go do life. Half a day, murders. I mean, it was what an insane thing to think now. So, anyways, it's like an 8-hour Gray Goose ride out there, and as soon as they let us off the chain, they're lining us up in front of this, ominous prison. And as soon as there's this big, he's like a big Asian dude, Filipino dude, maybe Samoan guy. I'm not really sure. He was standing next to this, other guy, this white guy, just like nondescript. I barely even remember what he looks like. They uncuffed all of us. This guy, big Samoan guy, turns and he just rocked this dude, like just rocked it harder than anybody I've ever seen be hit, and he just dropped him. And I just heard a oof and just bam, lights out, right? And so they come out and they start dousing him with pepper spray. They hit everybody else too, by the way.
They hit
Just
you
for
too? Like just
they
like
hit us. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got on the ground before they could like hit me directly in the eyes. But so we're all kissing the pavement with our hands on our head, and but later on, we find out. So they cart this guy that got hit. They take him off to medical, and a few weeks later, we found out he was dead. He didn't make it. He went into a coma or something, or seized up, and he died. So that was harrowing. And when that happened, I was like, oh, okay. I got to forget about any hope of getting out early or being on my best behavior. I got to survive. You know what I mean? So my whole goal from there on was like, okay, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here without catching a life sentence or without getting killed. That was like my biggest. That's when I let the past go. That's when I let because I was telling you the other day, it was like until that point, I had dreamed like, okay, we're gonna get out. I was still holding on to my old life as this like drug kingpin or whatever I painted myself in my mind, you know. And I was like, okay, once I get out, I'm gonna get my old crew back. I'm gonna get my connections back. I'm gonna get this money back. I'm gonna do it differently. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it smarter. I think most criminals or guys at my level, you know, we fantasize about that, especially when we're in jail. But when that happened, I let everything go. I was like, okay, my only objective is to survive this place.